So episode 1 gave us a lot of revelations, a lot of surprises, and a few turns. We ended with the night sky blinking all of the light, all of the stars, to the numbers of Augie's countdown to really remind her that her time is running out. So here we are. Welcome back. My name's Sean. This is Sean's Take, and this time episode 2 of the Netflix show 3-Body Problem. This is your spoiler warning. From this point on, I'll assume you've seen the episode or don't mind if I spoil it. I'll also use clips from the show as is allowed under the fair use provision of the copyright laws of 1976. Let's dig into this episode. Grab a beverage, sit back, relax. There's a lot in this one. This show really packs in a lot of information into each episode, or at least it has so far. So we pick up with Saul visiting Vera's mother, who is Wenji, Yi Wenji from 1968. That's Vera's mother. And they're watching. It's on the news that all of the stars blinked, so everybody saw it. And Saul says, yeah, everybody on the planet saw it, but none of the satellites saw it. None of the telescopes in orbit saw it. So it never happened. It was a trick. So that's interesting that they made sure that we knew that the Hubble and the James Webb telescopes didn't see the stars blink, just the people on the planet. And Wenji it's hard to know whether she's just mourning the death of her daughter or if there's something else she wants to say about what's happening. I think that, we haven't learned yet the stuff that we need to from the 60s. Some of that comes out in this episode, including the big revelation at the end, but let's get to that in order. So Augie we find her in her lab at her company, the countdown's still going in her eyes, ready to test her nanofibers, and they have a successful test. They cut up, I guess, what they're calling an industrial diamond. They called it a diamond, but it was a cube, so I assume that's an industrial diamond that we've made, but it still sliced it perfectly. And she immediately instructs everybody to shut down the project, shuts everything down. And she goes outside, and her countdown vanishes. Detective Clarence is there, and he starts to talk to her about things. So back in 1968, we do a lot of jumping back in China, and we find out that all of these big satellite dishes on Earth, from America to Russia, and of course here in China, they're all broadcasting a message into space as part of, I guess, SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And they're all broadcasting the same message. And that message is, we extend our best wishes to you, inhabitants of another world. We hope to establish contact with another civilization. We extend our best wishes to you, inhabitants of another world. We hope to establish contact with other civilized societies. We look forward to working with you to build a better life in this vast universe. And we've been broadcasting that in many languages into space. So Wenji thinks that the signal's too weak, that, we're broadcasting at the most strength we have, but it'd be like standing on the beach in California and trying to yell to somebody in Hawaii, right? It's just not enough. Not going to hear it. And she does a little investigation and finds that a signal traveling to the Earth that bounces off the sun travels faster and is amplified. And there's a pretty good explanation she draws on the board how it works. And she actually writes the equation, although we don't get a good look at the equation. But she does a pretty good job of explaining why we're going to bounce off the sun to amplify the signal. And they take it to the commander. Well, they don't. Her handler does, I guess, I don't have a good term for him. And he takes full credit for it. And the commander says, no, we're not going to do that. So Wenji, as you might suspect, does it anyway. And she doesn't tell anybody, and she goes ahead and bounces it off the sun. So back in the present, Detective Clarence does get to talk to Augie. They talk about Mike Evans being at Vera's funeral, and she says that's just some guy. She finds out that he owns Evans Energy, one of the biggest energy companies on the planet, but he's also a conspiracy nut, and he funds counter news stories. He's an anti-vaxxer, things like that. Basically just sowing chaos. So Detective Clarence, shows Augie some security footage of when she met the girl. Now, I looked up on IMDb. The girl has a name. Her name's Tatiana. I don't believe we've heard it mentioned in the show, but rather than just saying weird girl or whatever, Tatiana, when she met her, and she lit her cigarette. But Tatiana's not on the film. She's been completely removed to the point that it looks like Augie almost looks like she's crazy, except that her cigarette lights. So she leans forward and it actually lights. So there was somebody there that was digitally removed. That could be the whole reason why they had Augie smoking in the first place. But anyway, where are we? So yeah, so Clarence thinks somebody manipulated the footage. And I thought it was funny as I was watching that scene between Clarence and Augie. You know, she lit a cigarette in his office and he had an ashtray there, and they were smoking cigarettes in his office. And I thought, where are we on planet Earth in 2024 that you're allowed to smoke inside anywhere? So I think it's funny that in the next scene that we see Clarence, he actually gets mentioned that he's not supposed to be smoking in his office. But in the meantime, Jin does use the VR headset, for lack of a better term, I'll just call it a VR headset, that she got from Vera's. And she enters into level 1 again, and it's the same wasteland, but this time it's snow-covered and freezing. She is met by a man who refers to himself as the Count of the West, and there's a little girl who he refers to as the Follower. He asks Jin's name. She says, "My name's Jin Chen." And he says, "No, you need a heroic name. What's your hero name?" And she chooses Copernicus. For anybody that needs a quick reminder, it was Copernicus that first theorized that it was possible that the Earth was not the center of the universe, that the sun was the center, and that the Earth actually orbited it, and that the Earth spun in place as well. And he even accounted for the pole shift and why the equinoxes happen. So that was all Copernicus. So the Earth flying around the sun. Interesting that Jin chose that. So it turns out that she needs to help save civilization number 137. And there are chaotic eras, and they need to predict when the next stable era is going to be and how long it will last. So we saw a small sun, we see a big sun come up, and there's only room to hide for 2 of them in the shadow. So the girl says, "Don't abandon me," and lays down flat on the ground and dehydrates to nothing, a husk. And the guy rolls her up like a beach towel, and he says people that dehydrate quickly or dry out quickly can be rehydrated when we get to the next stable era. And as long as one of us survives, all of us survive. So later, Jin shows Jack the game, and he tries on the game and is immediately killed by the host of the game, the game master, I guess, with a samurai sword, cuts his head off. He tries a couple of times, gets his head cut off a couple of times. But he does make the statement that, you know, he tasted the dirt, he could feel the cold, you know, all his senses were engaged, and that this technology was at least 150 years ahead of us. Now he makes snacks for a living, but he's one of the Oxford Five, so he's pretty smart. So Clarence, Detective Clarence, visits his wife's grave and gives her a red velvet cupcake. And Tatiana is there, quote unquote, visiting her father. And they talk for a minute. It really comes to nothing. Now we know that, you know, she's connected to the people with the countdown and she's watching Clarence. So while he doesn't have a countdown yet, they're aware of him. So the thing that the game host said to Jack when he tried to play Jin's headset was that he wasn't invited. She said it every time she killed him. So Jack gets home one day and finds a headset in a nice box with a note that says, "We invite you to play." So he puts on his headset, and he's in England, and it seems to be the same game. A man and a small girl come up. The man introduces himself as Sir Thomas More, and Jack punches him. And the guy asks him his name. And he says Jack. He says he'll need another name, and Jack punches him again. So while it's the same game and he has to try to save everybody like Jin did, it's somewhat personalized for him. So the game is even more advanced. We do get to Will. We get to meet Will a little bit. And we know that Jin is the one that got away from him, and she has a new boyfriend now. But we find out that Will has stage 4 metastasized pancreatic cancer, and he basically has 4 to 6 months to live. So Jin, back in the game, gets to present her theory to the Emperor, or gets to the Emperor, and the Count presents his, and he says that he can predict what's going to happen, and he breaks sticks and he lays them out in the palace, and Jin recognizes it, and she says it's just the I Ching, and the I Ching is an attempt to use math to make moral decisions, sort of a bridge between science and religion or mysticism, whichever you think. So he makes his prediction that the chaos era will end in 6 days, followed by 63 years of stable. And he instructs Jin to put her hand on the floor because the time will pass faster. And it does. I don't know if that's going to matter later or if that's just a device for now. But we get through the 6 days, and it appears a stable era commences. And they take all of the rolled up, dried up people and throw them into the water and rehydrate them. And most of them are naked and come out of the water, and they're celebrating. Jin throws the little girl's body into the water, and she rehydrates with all her clothes on, comes back out and says, "You didn't abandon me." Except that the guy was wrong. So they skipped ahead to the next era, but the next era wasn't burning, dehydrating heat. It was crushing cold, and everybody dies, including the girl. But the game host appears and says, civilization number 137 has been destroyed, but you did introduce the idea that science is more dependable than mysticism. You must use science in level 2. So she cleared the level without saving the society. So Detective Clarence gets summoned to his boss's office, I guess. It's a very spacious, Spartan office. And he says, "We got a complaint that you've been smoking in your office." And Clarence says, "I understand. I'll go outside. It won't happen again." And he says, no, there's no need. We fired the guy that made the complaint. He should be worried about what he's doing, not what you're doing. And Clarence actually feels bad that the guy lost his job. But basically the idea was, shouldn't have told on you. So they start talking, and we see the result of some of Clarence's detective work. And he discovers that back in 1977, and he relays the story. Back in 1977 at Ohio State, there was a signal received, and it was a 72-second signal, and the astronomer that was reading the signal, his name was Jerry Eyman, E-H-M-A-N, Jerry Eyman. He was looking at it, and he saw the signal, and he circled the signal and just wrote "wow" in the margin, because it was of an amplitude and a duration that sort of meant it was an attempt at communication. But it was only heard in Ohio State and on the Red Coast of China, which is, of course, where Wenji was. The Ohio State people couldn't decode it. They didn't know what it said. But Wenji was able to decode it. Before we get to that decoding, let's talk about the fact that they were looking in China to build a new radio observatory spot. And they came across a little hut that was occupied by an American, and it was in fact Mike Evans. And at this time, Mike Evans was busying himself trying to save a bird from extinction due to all the deforestation that we saw in the last episode. These birds were losing their habitat, and he was trying to save them. And so young Mike Evans has a copy of Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, and Wenji sees it. And as they're leaving, Wenji turns back to him and shakes his hand and quotes from the book and says, "Nothing in nature survives alone." And she makes the attempt to get them to build in a different spot so that the bird could be preserved. And the Red Guard says, "No, that's the spot. We're going to do it." So she's mad. They're going to destroy this bird just so they can build a facility. And that's when she gets the wow signal. She's the one there that got the signal that they heard in Ohio State. It's the other place. Except that because she's as smart as she is, their equipment translates it and she reads it. And the message, the 72-second message was, "Do not respond, do not answer, do not answer, do not answer. I am a pacifist in this world, and you are lucky that I'm the first to hear you. I am warning you, do not answer. If you respond, we will come, your world will be conquered. Do not answer. So Wenji's not feeling so good about the human race and what we're doing to the planet. And she responds. And she not only responds, she says, come, we cannot save ourselves. I will help you conquer this world. So I think that is the thing that's weighing on Wenji's mind in 2024 when she's talking to Saul, because these weird things are starting to happen. Stephen Hawking once said of SETI, because we are screaming into the emptiness of space and we're not hearing anything back. And Stephen Hawking once said, it could be that the reason the universe is quiet is because any species that makes noise gets destroyed. Be careful. So maybe that's what spurred the idea in this book when they wrote this book. I think it's interesting that they have the Chinese able to process and understand the message and the Americans not, unless it was sent that way, right? These are theoretically the same people that are doing the headsets. So we have Mike Evans, who's in China. What we don't know, my guess last episode was that the first guy that gave Wenji the book, Silent Spring, was Vera's dad. It doesn't seem like Wenji has had a baby, and it's a year later. So maybe Mike Evans is Vera's dad, and that's why he was at the funeral. But of course, he became dad when he was a hippie trying to save the world. And then, of course, there'd be some estrangement when he turned to being an oil tycoon or energy czar, whatever he is. So what are you thinking of this series? If you're liking my episodes, please give them a like, maybe subscribe, hit that notification bell. We're going to be releasing these every couple of days as I can until we get all 8 of them out. And I'm not watching ahead. I'm watching each one and then doing each video. So what do you think the message of the show is trying to be? We have to safeguard the planet as well as move forward? Or the technology's bad? Or what do you think? Let me know in the comments. All right, that's really it for here. I felt like there was something I missed. But we can talk about it in the comments. For now, that's this episode. My name's Sean. This is Sean's Take. See you next time.